Well, I'm excited today because I've made a new friend here, Mike O'Brien from Three Streams Worship. Mike, I have so benefited from meeting you online, I guess, and your content and your sort of sensitive pastoral approach to worship ministry. You have a way of saying some really hard things in such a gentle way, um, and just your teaching is just so fantastic. So, Mike, welcome to the Beyond Sunday podcast. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be included in your over decades long podcast, which I'm experiencing now. I've seen you on the TikTok, I've seen you on Instagram, um, with some amazing guests. But then I saw your website where you have a list of everybody you've had on, and I'm like, oh my goodness. These are some of my favorite people. So I am just honored to be anywhere near this list of people and hanging out with you, chatting, talking about the worship of the world and of Jesus.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, man. No, the honor's all mine. And yeah, just don't go too far back in the archives because I don't know how the all audio quality was on some of
Uh,
those episodes. So, but
wow.
um, but Mike, I want to start with this. So I don't want you to. You don't necessarily have to give me your entire backstory as a worship leader. I want to know what are the circumstances that led to you being a teacher, a coach, a trainer of teams. Like, what need did you see that caused you to step into what you're doing?
Yeah, when I was a kid, the church rescued me from a domestic abuse situation that was really dire. I was about 10 and my mom had brought me from Detroit to Atlanta with a guy, and it was bad. It was bad for many years, and we went and visited a church. I hadn't come to faith yet, and we were kind of obviously trying to figure things out. But in the South, there's a church everywhere. In the early '90s, there was a church plant everywhere. So this little Presbyterian PCA church set up shop, and we went, and they came and rescued us from this situation and got us, set up and helped pay some bills. And the music minister took me under his wing. So I was learning how to play the saxophone and the bass and the guitar. So he let me play saxophone and bass and guitar with the hymns. And I hadn't gone through any one-on-one class. I hadn't been baptized yet. I mean, maybe as a baby I was, but so I was brought to faith and discipled on the worship stage
Yeah.
by this awesome guy, Dan Cutchin, who's a professor in Dallas. And it changed my life. It gave me a grid of how to train and develop musicians and artists in the church, quote unquote, in a way that was much deeper, uh, and really inspires me, and it inspires the work that I do. So teaching and mentoring worship is my call. I'm like, what am I, 48, 49? And I've been doing it in the local church for 20 years, and then I've been doing it kind of full time for 10 years. So that's that's the call. And I keep trying to do other things. Hey God, do you want me to plant a church? Do you want me to pastor? Do you want me to do these other things? And he keeps saying, teach and mentor worship. I'm like, but that doesn't always pay the bills. It doesn't always do everything I want it to do, especially as I'm getting older. But he just keeps saying, teach and mentor worship. So that is what I'm doing.
That's amazing. As you're kind of working with different churches, what are the topics or themes that you're coming back to a lot with teams in terms of the teaching that you're doing, the things that you're noticing in teams? Like what are you working through with them? What's kind of like the
Yeah.
main thing right now?
I think the main need with the worship weekends when I'll come in and I'll spend Wednesday through Sunday with a team. A lot of people take their teams to a conference, which is fantastic, but that can be cost prohibitive. So um,
Yep.
my thing is that I like to come in and work alongside a worship pastor and the pastor and say, "Hey, how can I partner with you for a weekend to just bless your team, inspire them, encourage them?" Some of the big practical issues are, hey, our sound is a hot mess. Um, our, you know, our sound is a hot mess. We're having a hard time with transitions. Our vocals are kind of struggling, right? So those are things that we can just help immediately and help serve and have conversations about, do little workshops on. A lot of churches are interested in songwriting and creativity in the church. How do we begin a culture of writing our own songs for our zip code and for our sermon series versus just having to pull from uh, the the major labels? So those things are really interesting. Yeah, vocals, sound, practical. Like locking in the band, chemistry in the band. A lot of teams have been working with tracks for months and years, and they've lost their mojo. They've lost their vibe. They've lost just the soul of music making. So a lot of what I'm doing in small and medium sized churches is just saying, hey, how do we
Yeah.
recapture that? Let's just jam. Like, let's jam on two chords for 30 minutes. Um, and then teaching, the final thing I'll say is teaching worship leaders how to be developers. Um, to release their job, to move more from leading primarily to co-leading with several other people from their congregations, and developing bass players and drummers and sound techs, removing the governors that we set up and kind of the false walls in our churches, and saying, hey, how do we grow and disciple musicians in our church? So yeah, a lot of that.
I love it, Mike. There's this interesting tension with worship pastors, and I experienced this as a young leader. I grew up sort of when the worship movement was really taking off, and so heavily influenced by so many great worship leaders and songwriters, but where sort of worship was becoming this industry, and there was
Yeah.
this kind of artistic career path
Yep.
of like you could be a worship artist, and I feel like that tension is still present where we sort of view our roles as local church worship pastors with that tension of, yeah, I'm a local church worship leader, but real success is kind of like writing a hit song,
Yeah.
or being artistic, and
Yeah.
or worship leaders find themselves in a worship pastor position because they're talented,
Yeah.
when really what they want to be is an artist. They don't want to pastor people. Like, have you had to work through some of those tensions personally? And what are some things that you do to just sort of ground worship pastors in what worship ministry really is?
Yeah, I think, in my 20s and 30s, in my small local church, we started writing songs. In fact, there were Sundays where we would only sing our own songs, and none of them were signed. We
Yeah.
didn't know anything about publishing. We didn't care. It was just carefree. It was awesome. And we wrote in that local church that nobody's ever heard about on this podcast to this day. In my little local church, we write songs, we play them, we record them. We're excited about it. But the aspiration, the win for that is that we do it and that our church sings our own songs. Like,
Mhm.
that's it. That's the
That's
win.
it.
If there's bonus, oh, Vineyard wants to record one of my songs. Or, Chris Tomlin was driving by in his, Toyota Yaris, and he heard my song coming out of the radio, and he's like, I want to sing that. Great, we'll take it. We're not going to say no. But the reality is that Nashville doesn't need thousands of songs from the local church. They've got all the experts there creating the songs. So we might as well sing our own bad songs versus singing Nashville's bad songs. That's always
Right.
been my take. Like, Hillsong just put out a record and there's 15 songs on it. How many songs do you use from that album? One,
Yeah.
zero, two? That means there's 13 songs that are all, have all the resources in the world, and they could only come up with one or two corporate worships. So I'm just saying, like, we might as well do that within our church. So I encourage, yes, let's write, let's create, but let's recalibrate what the win is. Um, let's recalibrate what the win is, and then we can just celebrate it and be really satisfied with it, versus always feeling like, oh, we only had 92 listens or whatever. If your church sings your local songs, that is a win, and that's really beautiful. So yeah, I think it's good for us to do that. But the conflation of artistry in the church, um, is a real dangerous thing right now. And there's a lot of unhelpful things happening in that conflation.
Yeah. What are some of those unhelpful things that you're noticing that you're guarding yourself against and maybe helping other worship leaders guard against?
Yeah, I mean, Bob Coughlin's amazing, Sovereign Grace. He says so many good things. He's like the grandpa we all need to
Right.
to guide us. He's talking about 1 Corinthians 14:12, talking about this artists versus theologians and the purpose of art in the church. What's the purpose of it? It's to build up the church. I mean, if you're a killer artist, you need to build yourself up. You need to be authentic to yourself. But as a worship leader, we don't need authentic janitors bringing in their own uh, mopping system and their own fragrance. We need what's helpful for the church. And and worship leaders in the church, we're more janitors than we are artists, even if we are really good at what we do. It's a servant role. If there's a drop
Yeah.
down menu of like worship leaders out there, if there's a drop down menu that says, "What do you do for a living?" and it's like, "Oh, I work in education, or I work in the arts, or I work in the service industry, or a teacher, or leadership." Most of us want to check the arts box. Most of us want to say, I'm an artist, I'm a musician in the church, and the church provides for my art. But the reality is that you're more of a teacher than you are an artist. You're more of a leader than you are an artist. You're more in the service industry than you are in the arts if you're a
That's
worship
right.
leader in the church. It's a different job. It's completely different. We start the singing and the adoration of the living God in our gatherings, and then we don't get out of the way. We join with them and we worship Almighty God. So
No.
we start it and then we join it. We plan it, we orchestrate it, we start it, and then we join the journey. David Roos talks about worship being a journey. It's not like an event, right? It's a journey unto the Lord. The congregation journeying into praise. That's what we're doing. We're starting it and we're joining it. That's not what an artist does. An artist, they have main character energy and they keep that main character energy. And this is for all my folks that are killing it out there in the CCM world. They're the main character. And I want them to be because they're the artists. That's awesome. But the church, Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, 73 people in a cafetorium. What's the role of the artist? I would say more
Yeah.
servant than performer, certainly.
Yeah. The stage is not the center of worship. You know, our job is to empower the voice of our churches to make their worship, their voice front and center. I try to encourage bands all the time. You want to arrange your worship music around the voice of your
Ah,
congregation. Let
yep,
that be paramount and not so much draw attention to yourself,
yep.
right? And that there is a tension there, man, because I think if we don't look at that in a healthy way like you're describing, we can begin to see the local church as fans of our art rather than people that need a shepherd,
Yep.
right? And that is where a whole host of problems can result. And I always like to warn worship leaders, like some of the worship artists that you look up to. It's fine to look up to them in terms of their talent, in terms of their songwriting, in terms of their hearts for the Lord, but they may not be the best role model for what you are doing as a worship pastor,
Yeah.
right? I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to be self-aware enough to know that, we become the worship police. I become the worship police and the judgment of all the successful worship artists. But I mean, partly, honestly, because I didn't get it. I tried for it. I tried to be a great songwriter in the church and wanted my songs to blow up. And I used to sit in conferences and I would just think, man, if God, if you would just let one of my songs become even like number 99, I would be okay with it. Right. Then I would rest. Then I would stop striving and judging and trying to be this art. Just give me one little, even if I could just be a co-writer, like the ninth co-writer on a Phil Wickham banger, then I would be happy. Then I could say, I am the guy, and people would respect me and love me. But honestly, I just want the respect. I want the love. I want people to look at me and honor me like they honor
Yep.
Phil Wickham or Brian Johnson, or, all these people get honored. And we watch that. We see Mab City on the stage, and people are like, you changed my life. You helped me. I want to change people's lives. I want to help people. And I want to play music all day long. So yes, it's easy for me on this side of quote unquote failure, of not becoming a success, to judge those that are now enjoying the fruits of that success. So I just want to be fair, because oftentimes we'll go to a nice worship concert. I live in Atlanta, so I can go to see Passion City, and I used to have judgments about that. And then I'd go and I'd be like, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe
Yeah.
God is moving here, even though it's not maybe exactly aligned to my values. God is moving here and touching people that maybe would never be touched in my ministry, right? But I can trust that God knows what he's doing. So, yeah, it's a problem, but I don't think we need to spend most of our time obsessing about the problem. God has given you 9 or 10 musicians to pastor and shepherd and to lead
Come on.
songs for this Sunday morning. And 67 people are going to show up, and they're going to be facing you and your band that you put together in Planning Center with the songs you chose, and they're going to respond to the thing that God has given you the authority to lead. So, dude, that's pretty freaking awesome. I mean, remove the churchy part of it. Just a musician having 67 people in front of them every week. Most musicians, coffee shop musicians, be like, that's amazing. What?
Right.
And some of you get paid for it? What? That's awesome. So just from a technical standpoint, this is a great honor that we get to shepherd these Christians, this family, and we get to look out and see our family and our children, age 0 to 99, our grandparents in the congregation, and we get to choose the songs for everybody to gather in. Dude, that is a rock star. Like, I feel like, what could be
Come on.
cooler than that? And to not have to
Yeah.
deal, if it's a 1,000-member church or a 10,000-member church, then there's a bunch of problems there that we don't have. So, yeah, I'll critique it for a second. And I've certainly talked smack about a lot of successful worship folks. But the reality is that the true work is just in the local church, and I need to get on with the work that God's given me
Yep.
for that weekend. Um,
Yep.
and yeah. So that's where I'm at now as I'm getting older.
No, I love it, man. And it's important, right? We can turn our disillusionment, because I love your authenticity of what you just sort of laid out. Like, you would have loved to be Phil Wickham, right?
Sure.
Man, to just
Yeah.
to just have that sort of commercial success, recognition, fame, notoriety. But to take maybe what was once disillusionment and to turn it into a ministry of drawing attention to what it is
Yeah.
that we actually do as worship leaders, right? And like, it is such an honor and a privilege to serve people. And I love, Mike, I just love following you on social media, because you post videos and pictures of the teams that you're working with.
Yeah.
And a lot of people on social media, they post the big stage, right? Just the
Having the professional photographer send you the picture of you, like, in the
yeah,
throne room, like, bro, how many, you can post one of those a year, but if you're posting 6 or 10, come on,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's impressive, right? Just if you're if you're on a
Uh,
big worship night tour, like, hey, I would probably
sure.
post it too.
Yep.
But what
I
what you're
would in a heartbeat.
posting is this little rinky dink band, with a 70-year-old
Mhm.
old bass player,
Yep.
and you have a smile on your face and you're like, we get to do this today.
Yeah.
We get to lead these senior citizens in some singing.
Dude, it's
I love that.
here's what it is, David. It's it's Bob on bass and Barb on piano. Like that's the majority of what's happening in the church, in
That's
America
it.
at least. Bob on bass, Barb on piano. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, it's boomers in your band that aren't great musicians and they don't play the track and they don't want to use their in-ears and they take them out, even though it's really critical that they that they hear. They can't stand the ears, right? And they don't prefer that new song you picked. But they're trying. They're showing up. They're praying for you. Um, this is the church. This is the real church.
Yeah.
Multi-generational, hopefully multi-ethnic, right? Uh, so we're is age 0 to 99. It's not always great. It's 52 times a year, you know. Uh, there's no album cycles. There's no photoshops every week.
Right.
There's no deli tray. A lot of the worship leaders that we love and we adore and we think they're anointed, and maybe they are anointed, they haven't played music without a lawyer and a contract in 20 years. Like, a lawyer and a contract has been part of them serving the church and the Lord, which is great. Go for it. Awesome. But there's also deli tray behind the stage every time. There is lunch provided. There's maybe business class. It's just a different world than we live in.
Different
So
world. Yep.
we're you're most of us aren't going to get there. We don't need to strive to get there. And really, the gift of obscurity is truly a gift in the church. Like, these little churches that we serve, and we just keep showing up and grinding unto the Lord, is beautiful. Now, I do think we need corrections in that. I do think we don't need to give away our whole lives to systems and structures that have been damaging in the evangelical church, and really any church, where there's overbearing leaders that take advantage of musicians, underpay musicians, or don't pay us at all, or just systems that are in need of repair. I do think there's correction there. But let me just say, the
Yeah.
beautiful standard basic church is pretty awesome, and we don't need to trap ourselves in comparing all the time.
Yeah. My next interview I'm posting is with Mac Powell of
Mhm.
Third Day
Yeah.
fame. And it was interesting what he said. I loved his self-awareness. One of the things he said was, what I do is very easy. Like, he said those words. I
Yeah.
show up places and I share things with people and
Yep.
I sing for people, and they want to be there. They want to hear me. They are fans. And he
Yep.
said, what, the local church, that's where the real work happens.
Yes.
That is where, and he said that as a successful artist,
Yep.
he knows, because he said that. He said a lot of my worship leaders at my church want to do what I do, and I'm like, you know what? It's not all it's cracked up to be. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, probably some of the money is great, but the fact that you get to be with the same people and invest in the community week after
Yep.
week, there is a certain reward that you can't find as an artist,
Yeah. It's a
So,
joy. And really, I've talked to a lot of my friends, and we've talked about how thankful we are we didn't get the success that we wanted in
hmm,
an industry sense in the church, or our church is growing and thriving, because oftentimes we weren't prepared. We weren't really ready. It it would have been devastating to us and our families had we gotten what we wanted. Um, I know for me, it just would not have been good. God
yeah,
did a lot of work in my 30s and 40s now, um, just in soul care,
yeah,
the way I think about, things, and my secret life and my public life, how I talk to people. Uh, it just would not have been good. And living in the gifts of obscurity just keep paying dividends. I'm
Yeah.
just so thankful for it as I look at some of the people that got what I wanted.
Right.
Not everybody. Some people live the dream, and it's like, man, this it really is nice.
Right.
Being able to make music all the time, and your drummer never sucks. Your drummer's always like just some variation of amazing, and your sound
Right.
techs are like just unreal.
Top of the
Can I
line.
give you a little more? Do you want a little 2K in your hi hat in your left ear? Like, this is not my world. This is not most, but it would be nice. I'm not gonna lie. But
Right.
we just get to enjoy the gifts of obscurity, and they're good. They're really good.
Mike, I led worship recently at a church where they still had the floor wedges.
Yeah.
No in-ear monitors,
Yep.
no click.
Yep.
And, probably a younger me would have just had this visceral sort of frustrated reaction to like, how dare you be this
Mhm.
outdated? But there's just something so beautiful about that of I'm grateful for the tools and the clicks
Yeah.
and all of that. I've been a big proponent of modern worship technology
Yeah.
for a long time. But when you step away from it, it's kind of refreshing actually
Yeah.
to just be in open spaces with real musicians and real people with seeing one another and
Yes.
not having such a produced, um, highly production oriented kind
Yeah.
of worship environment.
Yeah, there are growing, thriving churches. There's a thriving church in Athens, Georgia, here I led worship for a few weeks ago. Bulletin, wedges, um, no screen, just no screen. And they're growing, thriving. And it's not like they don't have it because they can't afford it. It's just, yeah, we just don't do it. We don't need it yet. So there is a lot of pushback there in some of the younger church plants that are just like, we're just gonna dial it back. And you don't necessarily have to be like you could still be diverse and energetic. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a sleepy acoustic thing. It just
Yeah.
means there's different ways of going about this other than the one model we see, which is LED wall, buy your six
Yep.
tracks for $35 each. You got to use this software and this program. There's a lot of cliches in production that are simply just gadgets. I mean, they're tools and they're helpful, but I almost file it under easy beats better uh, because it's just easier. I don't have enough time, so all these tools are provided for me. Um, but I would just encourage us to think, well, what could we do? What if it all stripped away? To the Matt Redman song, how can we dial it up? One funny story I've got is I was with a band at a conference, and this 20-something guy had his ears in, and we're like 6 songs into practice. We've been practicing for an hour. It sounds amazing. Sounds so good. And this young person, this young whippersnapper looked over at me. He's like, "Hey, where's the music?" I said, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Where's the music?" I was like, "You mean, are your ears not working?" He's like, "No, they're working. I can hear everything." "Where's the music?" "Oh, you mean tracks?" "Yeah, we never put the tracks on because it just sounds good. I mean, we've got the tracks. We could put them, but it already sounded great. We got like the
He
best
wasn't
players."
used to that.
He just had no grid of like, you could do this without tracks. Like, and he wasn't saying we needed tracks. He just wondered where the music was. I'm like, "We're making the music, friend. Enjoy it." So I love tracks. I think tracks are fantastic. I think tracks solve a lot of problems in a lot of churches. But every church that uses only tracks should um, should should try not using tracks for one song a week.
Yep.
And every church has never used tracks. Download it, hang out. It's fun. It's like going to the candy aisle. Um, have a good
Yeah.
time. I know you didn't ask about tracks, but I just remembered that person.
No, I mean it's definitely a topic of a lot of tension, right? And you typically have like two sides that are just kind of at war. You
Yeah.
have the side that's like, I hate tracks, I don't want tracks, right? And
Yeah.
just kind of wants everything to be live and spontaneous. And then you have the tracks people that are just like, that's messy.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think both sides should try
Yeah.
and intersperse both sides, right? If
Yeah.
you've never tried tracks, like don't criticize it until
Sure.
you've seen what kind of value it can bring
Mhm.
to your team and their preparation and kind of having a roadmap. But then at some point, the tool can become something that we serve rather than
Yeah.
the tool serving us.
Yeah.
So,
I love, in the vineyard, we have this value of like, anything could happen. So, like, not anything will happen, which might be like a Pentecostal value of like, this thing's going off the rails every single week, But
yeah,
in the vineyard, we kind of like, yeah, if it goes off the rails, cool. If it doesn't, whatever, we don't care. Like whatever you want to do, Lord, like lead me. So there's some sense of uh, risk taking. So the track will remove all that risk and will just make it's just going to be quote unquote successful. You're going to get through the song, which for a lot of music ministers, a lot of worship folks at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning after a busy week, yeah, I just would like to get through this
right.
without messing up. Check the freaking box. Um,
Yes.
but we're missing out on this prophetic, fun adventure um, that's like 3% Grateful Dead, 3% Fish. I'm not talking about like blowing it up, but just saying, hey, if we're doing rock and roll, we got the tools of rock and roll in front of us. Drums, bass, guitars, organs. Man, let's dance a little bit. Let's leave space. So, hey, at the end of this third song, we're probably going to end it like this, but it could go anywhere. So, you guys just listen and let's see what happens. Big
Yeah.
boys and big girls, we can figure this thing out. Let's have fun. Let's enjoy it. So I love challenging bands just to, hey, let's let's at least find one spot every Sunday where we could have a little musical prophetic moment. And I'm talking Baptist churches, Lutheran churches, Anglican churches. Like everybody's hungry
Yeah.
for it. Everybody's
Right.
wants a little bit of it. I think we can try it out.
Yep. Yeah, I think some pastors have just gotten afraid of it becoming
Yep.
crazy,
Yeah.
right? So they've over programmed and over controlled worship
Yes.
when in that situation you throw the baby out with the bathwater. It doesn't have to be weird. It doesn't have to be unhealthy and strange and off the rails. It can be very healthy
Yeah.
if you leave the space for it, you know.
Yeah, to your point, some pastors have had some wacky people be their worship pastor. So they
Yes.
created systems and structures that said never again.
Right.
So pastors, I would encourage every pastor just to say, lead the leader that you have, um, lead the leader that you have. Don't lead the leader that burns you, because
Right.
you've already let them go, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of worship leaders too have these judgments against pastors, like pastor's not going to let me play that song. It's like, really? Did he say that? Have you asked him? You haven't talked to him in 5 years. You just assumed that he didn't like Cajon or he didn't like, you know, songs from the Gettys or so, like whatever. Like a lot of worship leaders, like, oh, they don't want us to do any of this. It's like, when's the last time you talked to your leadership? Because the person with the problem might have moved on a long time ago.
Right. That's why it's so important to have that open communication and connection, you know? But I know the tension there, man, because I've talked to pastors that have said, I don't let my worship leader say anything.
Wow.
We have the track. I want them to just stick to the plan because they don't trust them, right?
Yes.
And I get it. They may not have the skill of being able to exhort a room in a way that
Mhm.
is beneficial, but there's also some development that can happen there,
Yeah.
and I just think there's a lot of situations where there's just no trust. Worship pastor doesn't trust their senior pastor if they feel like they're
Yes.
in the dark ages, and then you have senior pastors that don't trust their worship leaders and they just sort of over control worship. When I feel if we
Yeah.
open up those lines of communication more and begin to respect one another for the perspective that we each bring to the table, you can
Yes.
really start moving in a healthier direction. I mean, are you seeing that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think when I do like little worship team masterclass, I'll have worship leaders get up and I'll say, hey, let's pretend like we're all at church and I want you to intro us to song one. So say whatever your spiel is for song one, and then we'll all follow, and we're just going to watch and worship with you, however you lead. Um, and a lot of them will say, "Well, I can't talk anymore." They won't let me intro anymore. So that's a
Yep.
thing, right? But sometimes people just need practice. So, hey, good morning, welcome. We're so glad to have you. Hey, good morning. The band is here, and we're so sorry because the first song's a little in a weird key, but we're happy to have you. So stand up if you want. Yeah, welcome. That the second example is a nightmare, right? So we can
Yeah.
practice it. We could say, hey, why don't you say one sentence? Welcome to Church A. Please stand if you're able. We're so glad you're here. Start singing,
Amazing.
right?
Right.
So you can practice that and you can work on it. So I would just encourage pastors and leaders like, hey, get some coaching and training for your people, like practical training. Hey, good
Yes.
morning. Hey, good morning. Hey, good morning. Like, see, David, I have to practice smiling. This is not my natural native thing, like it takes me a
Right.
while to get here because
Right.
I'm in metal land. Like in my brain, everything's metal, heavy
You're
metal,
so
right?
you're so emo.
Well, no, I'm metal generation. I'm thinking like there's an Iron Maiden, Metallica soundtrack going through my life. So, my resting worship face is sadder than most. So I really have to practice. Like I've spent a lot of time in the mirror holding my guitar, going, "Hey, good morning. Welcome. Hey, good
Yep.
morning. Welcome." Right? And people think, "Oh, that's not the spirit. You should just let the spirit work through you." No, we need these practical tips and tools. Constantly telling bands, "Hey, we're singing Joy to the World this morning. Could you guys look like maybe not like something really bad has happened?"
Yeah. A little bit
You
of
know?
joy, maybe.
But that's faking it, Mike. Yes, I want you to fake it a little bit till you make it. It's okay. It's not, there is it's
Mm.
strange, this conflation we talked about between artistry and music. Um, we are representing something on stage. We're on these stages, we're lit up, people are looking at us and towards us. So there is a sense of theater that's there, that's important, that we present well. Um, it, because if we're all just being authentic simultaneously, that could be really unhelpful to the church.
Yeah.
So, and ultimately, David, I don't want the church showing up and just staying, they have a duty and an assignment. If they're Christians, part of their role is to worship. So it's their responsibility as well, Bible believing Christians, to worship the living God. So we're all kind of duty bound. Let's get on with it.
Yeah. One of the best things my pastor ever did for me, and really all of us as a staff, was to teach us how to have an effective speaking moment from the platform.
Yep.
I had just never learned how to do that, and I went to Bible school. There was no classes on that. And he sat us down and he basically talked to us about the difference between a conductor and a trumpet player in an
Mm,
orchestra, right? The trumpet player, what they're thinking about is just playing their part, looking at
yep.
their notes, playing their
Hmm.
trumpet to the best that they can. The conductor's looking at the whole orchestra, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't just get up on stage and sort of close your eyes and have a moment with God, but you open your eyes and
Yes.
you invite people in. There's a relational quality. Like that
Yep.
honestly, and I've talked to pastors too that are like, I don't know how to train my worship leader. Like, I'm not
Mm,
musical. But what you do have as a pastor is your demographic, your people. And oftentimes as a pastor, you know how to communicate in an effective way from the front. Those
yeah.
are things that you can invest into your young worship leaders. That is invaluable, you know?
Yeah. One of my pastor, one time we went to like a Toastmaster thing. Like there's like whole organizations about public speaking. So we went to a seminar like that. One time we brought in a CEO from Home Depot or one of the top guys at Home Depot. came in and just taught us how to present, you know, and we just took notes and hung out for a couple hours. It's like we can learn some of this practical stuff, and it 100% be Holy Spirit and be helpful for the congregation. Um, just so we're not lecturing, because so many worship leaders, they just do these little sermonettes. And a lot of times it's because the songs aren't good enough. So we have to like prop up the songs with other stuff. It's like, bro, just sing the song. It's a little bit of shut up and dribble um philosophy, when
Right.
sports people start getting all political or whatever. Um, we just need to do what's helpful for the congregation to guide them in song and prayer and sacrament. It's something. It's not everything, but it's something how we talk for sure.
Yeah. So, Mike, I want you to talk a little bit about picking songs for Sunday. Let's get really practical.
Yeah.
Um, I've just seen a lot of your videos on TikTok and around just how I think there's just one video where you were kind of breaking down a top 10 CCLI song and you
Yeah.
were like, this is a great song, but I'm not going to sing this in my church.
Yep.
And I feel like most worship leaders, that's the first place they go. They go to CCLI to see what is the most popular song in the church these days. And it's like, let
Yeah.
me just string together hits. How do
Yeah.
you approach picking songs in worship, or how do you coach worship leaders in that exercise?
Well, I would encourage worship leaders to listen to everybody's answer to this. You're about to get my hot take on it. Mike O'Brien from Atlanta, spent a lot of time in the vineyard, has now spent some time in some other denominations. So you're getting my hot take. Tomorrow you might get Jeremy Riddle's hot take, Bob Coughlin's, Constance Cherry. Everybody's got different takes, but know that their take comes from a context, their context primarily. So they can give you some guiding principles, but if you're leading worship at a church in New Delhi, India, you're gonna know more than I know
Right.
about choosing a right song. And I'll say this: I'm more interested in evaluating a song within its context than I am evaluating any song on its own. So, for instance, I will sing one of those. Elevation writes a lot of what I would call like earnest, aspirational. Bones are rattling. We're freaking coming out of the grave, people,
Right.
whose bones, what rattling, what grave, don't worry about it. Just, it's going to be awesome, which I get it. Like, I get
Yeah.
that culture because that's the way Stephen preaches. Like, that's their culture is like, come the freak on. The world is awesome and life is awesome. Let's do this thing. I'll sing one of those songs, right? And I would say a lot of those songs, not all of them. I mean, my goodness, every movement has some bangers, right? Um, Theological bangers even. But I'll sing what I would call like a theologically light song. I'm going to couple that with "In Christ Alone," right? I'm
Yeah.
going to couple that with something that is a Matt Boswell song or a Getty song, right? I'm going to couple that with something that is a deeper dive in theology and like a richer and more detailed and explicit story.
Yep.
Um, that's the point. So I think any one song could work as long as it's not anti-biblical. It's just within the context of the morning and of everything that we're saying. Um, and so if I choose a song like I love Daniel Basha's got a song called Praise the Lord. It's such a brilliant song. It's a great first song. It's very psalm. So praise the Lord, O my soul, rejoice, for his love is strong and his mercy is never ending, right? Very psalm like. It doesn't point to Christ, it doesn't point to the Holy Spirit. It's kind of general praise. I'm going to couple that next with Behold from Paul Balash, which is like on the nose. Jesus, Son of God, Messiah, risen.
Yeah.
I'm not singing Behold at the Unitarian Church. I mean, I don't play Unitarian churches, but the Unitarian Church could play a lot of the CCLI top 10 because they're not explicitly Christian songs.
Right.
Um, so you can use some non-explicitly Christian songs if you couple them with songs that are a little deeper dive. So that's my one hot take is like think contextually, don't think each song is an island.
Yeah, it's really important, and I 100% agree with you. It's funny, I was at a church recently, just kind of as a consultant. I wasn't leading worship, but they're like, "We don't sing any Bethel here."
Mhm.
So we
Yep.
don't like Bethel. We don't agree with their theology. And then shortly after that, I was in their service and they sang Living Hope.
Sure.
And I was
It's
like,
like,
well, you might not realize this, but
yeah.
that is a Bethel song. It's
y-
also a Phil Wickham song, but it is a
Yeah.
Bethel song, right? And so I think it is just helpful to look at our set lists in terms of context, right? The problem is when our sets are primarily made up of kind of top 10 CCM hits, right?
Mhm.
Because then it's out of balance.
Yeah.
That tends to sort of get us theologically out of balance where we're putting ourselves at the center of something and our
Sure.
feelings
Yep.
that maybe it shouldn't be there. Whereas maybe an isolated me song
Yeah.
works in context with Behold Him, like you mentioned,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm totally with you there.
the me songs, I wanna say something about the origination of songs, but the me songs versus God songs. I mean, there are songs that are completely God. Revelation song is like 99% God. There's not a lot of personal narrative in that song. Um, There is a Redeemer, Old Twyla Paris, Melody Green song,
Yep.
primarily God you know, thank you, oh my Father, for giving us the Lord and giving me your spirit. Like the pronouns of me, us are kind of like just passive parts of the song and the sentences, but the subject of the song is God himself, which my goodness, friends, we need to put God in our worship sets. There's so many
It's
times
funny
I'll
that we
visit a
even have to
church.
say that.
But here's the thing, I've been tricked too. You're listening to Spotify and you're getting your worship on, quote unquote, and you're these songs and these producers and the candy. It's like, oh, you feel the Holy Spirit, and that's true and that's good. But the songs of Spotify don't fit for 73 member church. It
Yeah.
doesn't work. Songs produced for Spotify with usually tenors or artists with really cool voices that cut, they're made for Spotify. They're made for the radio. They're not necessarily made for the sanctuary. And as pastors, worship leaders, it's our job to cut through that. It's our job. My heart has been broken so many times. When I hear a song, I love it. I mean, I'm jogging or running or working out. I'm like, dude, this is a banger. I want the whole world to sing this. And then I sit with it at a guitar and I recognize musically, it's just not going to work. Dang it. Ugh. This would have been
Yeah.
cool. Or theologically, you're like, man, my head's tilting way too many times. I can't, it's just, it's a bridge too far.
Yeah.
So,
I was talking with
yeah.
I was talking with I think it was Elias Dummer about this
Hmm.
recently, but worship music is its own like listening category now.
Yeah.
So it is a stream of CCM, the predominant stream. And what's helpful for me is to kind of separate it. I can enjoy all the CCM stuff just sort of as music that I listen to.
Yep.
I enjoy it. It's very moving, it's exciting, whatever it is. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the songs that I need to sing with my church
Yeah.
on Sunday. That practice requires a little more critical thinking and thinking about theology and
Yeah.
context and who's in the room, all of that. And so that at least that's helpful for me. It's like
Yeah.
I can enjoy worship music just as something that I play in my house or in my
Yeah.
car or whatever, but I need to have a little bit more of a grid for Sunday morning.
Yeah, my individual green space, it's labeled green space on my Spotify. My jams of worship are like the deepest, coolest dives. songs I would never sing ever. There's a few like we talked about Bashta, uh, his sister Harvest.
Yep.
Harvest has some of the most killer. I mean, there's a few congregational songs that she's written, but her voice and like the atmosphere, it's like, dude, that I meet with Jesus in that space. Um, and so I think it's just okay to have some of that personal space and corporate space. And a corporate song, I mean, it gets really hard to get into that, for me to say this is a corporate song. And to your point about origination, many worship leaders that listen to your podcast will have elders or leaders in your church say, I don't want us to sing songs from this movement. And to your point, uh, that it's kind of difficult or impossible to police that because we don't understand. Because a lot of people are saying, I don't want to associate with that. And anybody associating with that person, I don't want us to do their things. So, in the way publishing works, um, is to your point, a lot of these writers and movements are writing together. So, a song like Goodness of God has Chris Tomlin and Bethel and Jason Ingram. So, all of them are complicit with what Bill Johnson said August 13th of 2009 in a sermon. I okay, you wanna make you wanna make that point, so now all of Chris Tomlin's songs are out, all of Bethel's songs are out, all of Jason Ingram's songs are out, which is half. Jason Ingram's the Max Martin of
Worship
worship.
music.
So if Jason's out, then, man, you better start going back to the hymns, and so many people are, "Awesome, let's do that." Well, have we read about the hymn writers? What have they been up to? What were they doing? A lot of complementarian churches sing Fanny Crosby songs. If worship is teaching and instruction, you have a woman teaching and instructing you. So if you want to go down the list, we can start going down there. And then let's talk about your worship leader. What are they up to? What do they believe? What's their theology? What's their secret life? They're delivering that song. If a worship leader is singing a Getty song and the Gettys are approved, well, is that worship leader that's delivering the song and leading, are they as cool as the Gettys? And do we know who the Gettys pastor is? And who's Matt Boswell's pastor? Where's he going to? Like, so let's just start tearing it all down if you want to tear it down. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's so good. Yeah, because, if you take that reasoning, then maybe no song is applicable, right? Because they're carried through imperfect people, you know?
Yeah,
What I would
yeah,
rather do is be able to pastor people through thinking critically
yes,
about, like, just because we sing Living Hope, which is actually a great song, a lot of
it's
great
great.
theology, and
Yep,
it's a hymn type song. I can still sing that song, but not agree with the theology of Bill Johnson, or
sure. Yeah.
something that they did at Bethel. And
Hmm.
it's good for me to wrestle with that, and rather than to just be indoctrinated or to remove myself from all streams of Christianity to stay in my safe little bubble.
Yep.
I can experience this and say, hey, I disagree with that, but that's still a
Yeah.
great song.
Yeah. Churches are writing checks to organizations all day long, right? All kinds of vendors. And some of those vendors are worship centric vendors. Um, People are worried about the doctrine of certain vendors, but not other vendors. So your banks or your renewed vision or whoever
Right.
else we're writing checks to. Do we know
Planning Center.
everything that's going on? And even the songs, like if you take an approved person, a lot of people say, "Hey, Getty's on the approved list." Sovereign Grace, Boswell's, they'll kind of rattle off like a certain group of people. But the distributor oftentimes is Capital or what's the other big one? Basically, they're secular organizations.
Right. Yep.
there, there's lots of naughty things happening with our money that we probably wouldn't be really excited about. But God takes our imperfect. Thank goodness God takes our imperfect worship and perfects it unto the Father, um,
Yeah.
because we're all in trouble if that's not the case.
That's right. Yeah. So good, man. Mike, I'll let you go here in a second. This has been so rich and insightful. Is there something about just worship pastor to worship pastor, just chopping it up? Like this
Yeah,
is
man.
this is so refreshing. Um, Anything you want to leave our listeners with, kind of a theme burning on your heart, or a word of
Mm,
encouragement or challenge based on all the work that you do with worship leaders in churches? Anything we haven't covered yet that you'd love to pass
mm.
along?
Yeah, I just want to say to those that are grinding it out week after week, the Lord sees you, He loves you. Um, the things that drew you to this ministry in the first place, I just pray that God would return you to that sweetness, that gentleness, that goodness. Um, and that as you follow imperfect leaders, and they try to lead you, an imperfect music minister or worship leader, that God would just give you grace for others, give you grace for yourself, for your teams that show up on time, that don't show up on time. Like the work of ministry is really good. Um, and the Lord sees you, and you are doing the work of the ministry of discipleship that might not be on your title, but you're discipling those young people that are in the team. You're discipling the burnt out people that are on your team. You are a pastor, you are a leader, and the Lord is using you. And I just pray that God would fill you with His Spirit, that He would lead you and direct you, that He would guide you to rest and to have weeks off where you're
Mm.
not in charge, weeks off where you're in the congregation holding your spouse's hand or hanging out with your friends, where you could just participate in worship. I pray that for you, that God would bring all the resources that you need for the seasons that you're in.
So good, man. You just went full on like ministry mode right there,
Mm.
praying over us. I love it.
Uh,
Mike, for any listeners that are like, I kind of like this Mike O'Brien guy.
mm.
Like, maybe we should work together. What's the best way for people to get connected with you and Three Streams and what you do?
Yeah, well, my ministry is just me and my wife that helps me. My wife's a spiritual director and a homeschool mom. Um, but we run everything from our little house here in North Atlanta. So basically, I do one on one worship leader coaching via Zoom. So I have several folks that I meet with for an hour a month, and I try to get your church to pay for it. And I just hang out with you. I pray for you. We talk, we open a planning center. I watch you sing. You tell me about your grumpy sound guy. We hang out once a month. So I do that. And Three Streams Worship com, you can see that worship coaching thing. I also do worship team weekends. So I'll fly to your church on a Thursday. I'll rehearse with your team Thursday night. We co lead. Friday night, we'll hang out, do songwriting or inspiration. Saturday, we do training for your whole team. And you and I build it together. Like I don't just have these Lego, I have Lego pieces and we just fit them in, but you tell me what you need. And we design a weekend that serves your team, blesses them, we feed them. And yeah, it's a very niche gig. And I'm not selling a book or a song, so I just kind of come in and work alongside you. And then also, yeah, just spending a lot of time doing like consultant general. This past Sunday I went to a church and just took notes like
Yeah.
secret shopper, I guess. And I
Yep.
hung out in the green room and some kind of more consultant kind of stuff. But yeah, would love to help you and your ministry however I can. Feel free to reach out, follow me on all the TikTok's kind of fun. I've got a lot of fun community there, and Instagram. So yeah, contact me.
Amazing. I'm looking your suggested reading for worship leaders.
Mm.
I just pulled this up.
Oh yeah.
Some good ones on here. Um, some surprising ones, I feel like.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of worship ones, but you have like the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene. That's kind of an interesting
uh,
worship recommendation. This
yeah.
is a great list.
Yeah. That book is all about protecting yourself. I mean, if you've been in worship ministry, I'm in 30 years now.
Yeah.
Um, so, like, yeah, just protecting yourself against abuse and abusive power, I think that's part of the game. So Robert's book is really good on that.
100%. Yeah. So we'll link all this in the show notes so people can access that list, and also your ministry. Mike, thank you, my friend, for what you're doing. It's such a needed ministry that you do. And I know sometimes it can probably feel like, why do I keep doing this? And am I serving anybody? But man, this is the real work. Just coming alongside worship leaders and helping them in their local context. So thanks for what you
Amen.
do, and thanks for investing in us today as podcast listeners, man. We
Yeah,
appreciate it.
man. Such an honor. Thanks, David, for all you do. Thanks for the invitation.